my takeaway from this is that this is a good conversation. I think everybody feels like the local regional is complicated, and maybe opening it to Montana feels like it's more inclusive, but the value space needs to be communicated if that's where we want to go. So just keep chewing on it, and we'll keep having the conversation. I do want to just say that somebody spoke in the PK talks yesterday. I do not in this moment remember who it was, but the word authentic was used, and it struck me when it was said. And so just listening to everybody, the synthesis that I got out of it, and I'm just throwing it back at you to see how it fits with you, was authentic food, Montana produced and processed. There's something along those lines, kind of lean you into capturing both the family of Montana and the values of who we are. So just something to think about. So we're going to break out into subgroups. I don't know how many we are, but the idea was to break out into the area where you identify as your primary role, or where you have a primary interest in a gap. You know, it could be that maybe you're a producer, but your main struggle is with the distributors or something, and you have a real focus there where you want to have a conversation. And so we'll have this conversation about gaps in our little breakout sessions. We're going to take the rest of the time to do a report out. And if you guys could focus the reporting maybe on one or two highlights. Okay, guys, we're going to do a report out. Thanks so much. Amelia's going to talk about what they did in waste recovery.
Yeah. Did you want me to write on the board or just mark the paper?
Mark the paper.
Okay. Great. So we made it through the other pillars of our local food system, and our favorite points turned out to be distribution and transportation across the state. So whoever it was that, can't remember because now everyone moved, but someone said about how trucks can take things on their return trip, and that actually doesn't really make that much of an impact with carbon footprint. So making that more efficient. Then we really liked what we said about consumers, creative reduction of waste, quality control with contaminants, and how herbicides can slip into compost, persist through the compost process, and then damage someone's garden for years to come. And then also seeing value in the food waste. So we talked about how glass recycling is disappearing across Montana, and people are so emotionally tied to not putting their glass in the trash can. What if people had the same concept with their food, and were, holding on to their food waste and not wanting to put it in the garbage can if they didn't have another option? So kind of flipping that perception there. Our legislation piece, we kind of came to some examples out of Kalispell and Missoula that have a local ordinance that people just sweep rake their leaves into the curb, and the city will come by and collect it. It's easy for residents, and the city already has the infrastructure to do major collections like that because of snow plowing and street cleaning, and it's already a practice we're familiar with. And then also creating zero waste institutions in schools, hospitals, and teaching people through those collective spaces how to be less wasteful. On our reverse side, we talked again about what's missing, and that, mainly that came up again with transportation, that we could be using some logistical software to figure out how to make that transportation piece more efficient. Because it's really hard to wrap your brain around how, delivery trucks can be, creating these new routes that deliver the things that they need to deliver, and at the same time collecting the waste from the institutions that they're restaurants or cafeterias that they're delivering to, and where those composting facilities need to be in relation to distribution centers and warehouses. So I think that was the highlights of our group. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, consumers, come on up.
My name is Josh. I'm a consumer. We didn't get a nice, pretty thing all together for you guys. But we had a lot of great thoughts, so I'll try and summarize what happened.
I don't know if you want to pen it on.
I can't do both. I'm not that talented. One of the things we thought as consumers we could use support in, or gaps that we had, was the idea of educating people on this kind of dynamic between the value of food that's meaningful, food that has environmental impact, and the other side of that dynamic is the cost of that food and what the cost of real food is. And that's a common complaint we hear trying to advocate to our friends. You guys should shop better. We're like, oh, it's expensive. Like, is it though? Anyway, so some education would be great. It's the support we need, as well as the information for folks who have been educated like that, or wherever they're at with their food journey, just what the resources are for finding these people who are growing this kind of food. Some other highlights we were talking about, we're thinking people who could help us with these things are the nonprofits and their outreach and their education. We can't always rely on nonprofits though, so we're saying maybe some sort of initiative. Like one of our group members brought up as an example for smoking, like a cigarette tax, and the money from that tax went back into Medicaid to kind of expand and help people with that. Something like that for nonprofits could be interesting. Another highlight for us, we were talking about kind of the who's missing, just who's not here. We need to reach out to these other consumers. That's what we were thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
That's a good summary. Yeah, much more.
Okay,
pretty picture.
distribution.
We've got lots of lines and arrows and such. So we talked about, we really started out talking about challenges. What are the biggest challenges? And one of the things that kept coming up is corporate food stores and how hard it is to get into the large stores, the Albertsons, the Safeway, that kind of thing. There's limited incentive for those stores, and they really don't have the ability to make some of those decisions. Some of that is too much dictated by their corporate offices. Institutions are challenges because of budget and also because of policy. But it was interesting that there was some discussion about how there seems to be more local food here in Bozeman than there is in the other MSU locations, and just curious about that. I don't know what kind of policies they have here. Food deserts, the dollars to ship and pick up, and there was some of that discussion about, the eastern part of the state. It's too far to go, it's not cost effective, they don't have as much business there. And in terms of bringing something back, that's great. That was a part of a discussion too, if they're going to go someplace to be able to bring something back. But again, if there isn't a lot there to be able to pick up, it's hard to justify the cost of doing that. And then also the other thing that came up under food deserts is the interest. And part of that might be education. Part of it is just that, some of these small institutions, grocery stores, whatever it might be, they just don't have the interest in buying something that is local, regional, whatever you want to call it. So whether it's because they're not educated or they don't have the demand from their customers, who knows, but that's a concern. I'm going to skip over this. And then we got down to seasonality. And the challenge there is staffing and then production, or that relates to, of course, producers, but that there isn't production for a longer season. So if they're selling to a restaurant, being able to keep that chef engaged and wanting to buy product through them. If it were a little bit longer growing season, that might be helpful. Storage is a very short-term problem, and they can't afford to purchase, say, refrigerated storage for or rent storage for the whole year when they only need it for such a short period of time. But in the height of the season, that's a concern. We talked about policies for institutions to buy local. Could there maybe be more? That might be something, and that also would come under pillars. And then we talked about that they don't do any distribution into tribal areas. That at this point, that's a kind of a one-way thing. There's a distributor that picks up from one of the tribal groups and sells a product, but no deliveries going that direction. And then we started talking about other pillars and how that could come into play. And, you know, we talked about education. Again, that might relate back to the interest in some of these other categories, but education through schools, someone mentioned YouTube, and then also publicity, or as someone else referred to it as outreach, however you want to call that. And then producers, if they could lengthen their season by doing some, maybe some hoop house, high tunnels, something like that, so they've got that production for a longer season, which is one of the challenges to be able to have more product available. The thing that, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, but the thing that seems to be coming out here that would really help them is if they could get past this seasonality and storage, and we're not talking about 12 months out of the year, just a longer season, and the problem with the short-term storage. Anything else that was a really, like a big hitter that I maybe didn't mark? Okay.
And Janet, do you mean in the storage, just to clarify, storage by who? The distributor?
The distributors.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
the distributors.
And was there any discussion on where you might find those resources, or is that still an unknown?
That is still an unknown.
Okay.
Yeah, and part of that with the producers producing longer, that's an education piece, that's a business plan piece.
So the storage could be who's not in the conversation yet, like just thinking outside the box there.
Possibly.
Okay.
Possibly.
Great, thank you. So this is are you producers and processors over here? You look like one big group. No, you two groups?
Yes, one big group.
Okay.
Just producing.
Okay. Was there anybody in processing? No.
I think it's a gap.
We had a lot of ideas, but one that we didn't think about was creating a whole nother sun so we could extend the growing season. So sorry about that. I thought, dang it. We had a great group. Really hit the ground here running. So the difficulty, the pinch point for us, it seemed for the group was producers, each other, all of us in terms of not collaborating enough, not talking enough about what they're producing. Seems to be a saturation at markets because that lack of having discussions. The other thing that really came up in the beginning but also came up at the end was legal help, almost having like a legal team, a set of resources, some counsel, business advice, how to grow, markets, market analysis. There's a lot going on in Montana that you guys already know, but just a lot of things that just on the verge of exploding. And so a major pinch point was really having market identification, progressive assistance, marketing, small business development, almost having like that's who's missing is almost like a team to go to for that progressive whole nother level beyond. Let's see, there was processing did get mentioned. If you're organic certified, you have to go a long ways to get it done, or you can't get in, so that's a huge problem. When your stuff's ready, it's ready. Let's see, where was the... We did talk about seasonal, which also tied into this first conversation about working together. And then as longer our time went by together, we basically got to hear about, and I don't think the Abundant map does this, but it might, having almost a seasonal regional menu, so to say, that you can communicate to your consumer about here's what's in season in western part, middle part, eastern part of Montana. Here's when things come into season, because we cannot invent a whole nother sun. It isn't going to happen. This is what we're doing, but also it would collaborate within the group about, or communicate in the group about, hey, you're growing radishes. We talked a lot about radishes, so I remembered. Why don't you think about asparagus? Can you diversify into asparagus? Or, just talking about how we can kind of all get on board and we all get a piece of the pie instead of one of us getting a lot of the pie. So that's really what these nice pictures are about. Here are your seasons, because I'm a picture person. So here's what you can get in Montana all year. Here's what you can get in each season, where to go, where to get it, and then those groups talking to each other.
Yeah, I think to add on to what a previous group said, the seasonality issue, it can be a variety of overlapping solutions just to better satisfy consumer expectation, especially until consumers can be educated to adjust their expectations seasonally. So some season extension opportunities, whether that's hoop houses and veggie production, or changing calving and lambing schedules and breeding schedules, obviously before that. And then seasonality education, for consumers, including chefs, institutions, grocers, and individual households.
And then the last question, what role can we play in resolving? We did this in basically 5 seconds or less. You can tell by my handwriting, but it must have come up the entire time we were together, but this collaborating, communicating, a lot of vertical collaboration across the entire system. Like that's kind of what's going to make the whole world go round, I think, for us. A lot, or not a lot, but quite a few times calling your local reps, because one really important thing that was mentioned out was that producers feel like they have to go to and find information, but it would be great, and a lot of other groups mentioned it too, that outreach piece about how can we get more extension agents to be able to buy some time to go out, like lessen their paperwork or something, or research, or I don't know. That's your department.
More
but
capacity.
calling your local reps, and don't forget to say thank you.
Your reps being extension?
Well, I think, like your legislators, and even your county folks too,
Gotcha.
like commission to say, we'd like to see Extension Bureau to engage more in local food systems, niche producers. If that's what you all are asking for as potential clients and constituents, it just helps those folks that make decisions about us and how we can operate know that that's a need out there in the state, that they want MSU and our partners at U of M as well to help with.
Cool. And just to confirm, the 1 or 2 things that were the highlights, I don't want to presume.
Oh, it's all highlight.
And another sun. Okay.
But we did red dot it.
Oh, okay. Oh, they're there.
It's
Thank
really
you so
the
much.
communication, collaboration, and really that expert,
Perfect.
higher level.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just a teeny follow-up on the legal help.
Yeah.
What's the need there?
The example came up about contracting in terms of being able to, okay, the story problem came up, someone may ask for a lot of cabbage to be produced or grown, and then the other person backed out of the deal because it was like on a handshake, and someone said, well, I do contracts, and then someone else mentioned a lot of smaller producers aren't going to think of a contract, but if there was a way to sort of build that like a CYA deal for small producers might be it's an acronym, I'm sure you all know it, for smaller producers to just tap into that, to maybe just kind of draw that up for them. They can download it or something, but did I get that right?
I do have one answer on that kind of. There is a nonprofit called Farm Commons. Rachel Armstrong works on all legal issues for small farms. She's actually going to be at the MOA conference as a speaker. She's coming to Missoula to do workshops. So if anybody is thinking legal help or knows someone who is looking for legal help, that's a good place to start.
So yeah, she'll be offering a 6-part workshop, and Todd was trained as a co-presenter or co-trainer?
Back in Missoula.
Okay. And yeah, December 6th here in Bozeman at the Commons, and we do offer a 1-day pass to the conference if you just wanted to come on that Friday. And I don't know how much that workshop is, but the 1-day pass is $100. And that includes all your food.
She has a full website with tons of information on it. Everything from business entity setup all the way to contracts.
So it's a really good deal to go through this workshop.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.